Welcome to Thrive Deeper, the show based on the Thrive Bible reading guides. This is an ongoing conversation about God's Word with Thrive author, Dr. Matthew Jacoby.
Good morning, Matt.
Morning, Stu.
Thrive Deeper, our fortnightly Bible study, and back in the book of Exodus, and picking up this episode from chapter 5. Listeners, welcome. Great to have you with us. We're moving into or continuing in the book of Exodus. If you haven't had a listen to the first episode of the book of Exodus, really encourage you to do that. We worked through from chapters 1 through to chapter 4, where Moses met with God at the burning bush, and then was instructed to work with Aaron. And at the end of chapter 4, we see Aaron and Moses getting back together again.
The reluctant servants.
That's right. The
somewhat reluctant servants.
Yeah, that's it.
Who am I?
Yeah.
Please send someone else.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we're going to see that still continue as we come into chapter 5. And to some degree, I'd have to say, as I've read through the passages we're going to cover today, which is chapter 5 through to chapter 10, you can kind of understand why. It's like Moses,
of course you can.
It's like, hang on, I'm doing what you told me
I'm
to do.
I'm going to go to the most powerful person on earth that could, have me not just killed, but probably killed in all sorts of creative ways. I mean, the Egyptians were pretty cruel people. And, God's saying you need to, go with this guy's a goat herder now. I mean, it's a remarkable moment. So, we can't be too hard on Moses, can we?
No, let's not. All right, so chapter 5, Moses confronts Pharaoh for the first time. And I think there's a question here, Matt, that Pharaoh asks that I think actually sets the scene for what happens over the next 10 chapters. So Moses says, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says, let my people go so that they may hold a festival for me in the wilderness." But Pharaoh responded, "Who is the Lord that I should obey him by letting Israel go?" And I think we're going to see through the next few chapters where the Lord is going to actually compare the Egyptian gods with who he is and reveal who he is.
Yeah, because of course we're dealing with polytheistic, both I would say, Stu, in a way, pantheistic in the sense that they tended to personify natural elements. The storm and the Nile and the Nile is in a sense is deified, but they're also polytheistic, so many different gods. So of course the question is, okay, so which God are you representing?
And are you more powerful than this one or this one or this one or this one or this one? Like, why should I listen to you? I'm doing so well with all my own.
Exactly. And actually also Pharaoh saw himself and was seen by the Egyptians as the son of a god.
Yes.
He
was seen as deity, basically.
A kind of deity himself. So that's what motivates the question in that context. I know it's a strange question for us, but this was all preempted, of course, when Moses said to God when he was being called, "What if they ask me who, what is his name?" That in a polytheistic context, they're going to ask that, aren't they?
Yes.
And it's exactly what Pharaoh does ask. So this is the interesting thing, Stu, about this first stage in this plan. So Moses goes, right? It takes a bit for him to actually go, all right, okay, I'll go, I'll trust you. And then he goes and he delivers the message, and then it gets worse.
Just to come back up a little bit, he'd already told the people of Israel what he was going to do.
Yeah.
So they kind of knew this is what he was going to do. And I guess there was a level of anticipation from the nation of Israel who were under slavery or bondservant to the Egyptians. So they already knew he was going to do this. And then he goes and, as you say.
And it says actually when he went to them, he performs the signs that God had given him to perform. And it says they believe, but it's a shallow form of belief because that's going to get tested. Yeah. In fact, the testing of faith is going to be a very, very big theme throughout the book of Exodus. So look for this. This is God testing the heart. It's a very unique thing about the biblical faith. It's very much about the heart.
Right.
So all through this, God is going to be showing up where people's hearts are at.
Yeah.
Okay. And the difference is going to be, will you trust and obey, or will you harden your heart and stand against what God is doing? So we're going to see this in Pharaoh. He's already said, I'm going to actually harden Pharaoh's heart, which means it's not that God causes Pharaoh to disobey, but because he has a hard heart, God is going to compound that, right? So his hardness of heart comes to the surface. So in the same way, God is going to do things throughout this book, and in fact, the whole rest of the story that's recorded in the first 5 books of the Bible in the life of Moses, a lot of this is going to be about God testing the heart and making the hearts of the people manifest and their willingness to trust or not.
Which is where it began.
Yeah.
Did God really say?
Exactly. So key theme throughout and right into the ministry of Jesus, of course. So the first thing that happens then is that, so he delivers the message.
Pharaoh doesn't like the message.
Pharaoh doesn't like the message.
Says,
so he thinks
nah.
this people, they're dreaming dreams. They're getting lazy. They're too much time to think and to, stir up a bit of rebellion. Let's make it harder for them now. It was already hard. Now we're not going to provide them with straw to make bricks. They have to go out and get their own straw.
Yeah.
That's a whole lot of extra work. I mean, a lot of extra work now.
And I think
they have to do on top.
Yeah, and the key here is that for the Egyptians, they were already anxious about how quickly and how numerous the nation of Israel had grown, and they were concerned about these people and realizing that unless we really keep them under the thumb, there is a chance of a rebellion here. And so this is kind of him sensing the start of that, I suspect, and going, we need to keep these guys even busier so they don't have time to think about such things.
So chapter 5, verse 17, Pharaoh said, lazy, that's what you are, lazy. Yeah. That's why you keep saying, let us go and sacrifice to the Lord. Now, get to work. You will not be given any straw. You must produce your full quota of bricks, nevertheless. And it goes on to say the Israelite overseers realized they were in trouble. Right. And it goes on to say, when they left Pharaoh, they found Moses and Aaron waiting to meet them. And they said, may the Lord look on you and judge you. Yeah. You have made us obnoxious to Pharaoh and his officials and have put a sword in their hand to kill us. Right. So they trusted in God and things get worse. Let's just pause on that moment, right? Yeah. I mean, this is an important, because remember, this is the map for our lives. I mean, I remember this stuff, right? Because sometimes I trust God, things get worse. It's as though God's saying, do you really trust me? Yeah. Because trust could just be, I really hope God's going to come through. Like I'll kind of step out in the
hedge my bets a little bit.
Yeah. Well, what God wants the most is our trust. And so he will do things that really call for deeper trust. And this is what is happening here. This is going to get shaken. But Moses actually steps forward here. It says in verse 22, Moses returned to the Lord and said, why, Lord, have you brought trouble on this people? Is this why you sent me? Ever since I went to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has brought trouble on this people, and you have not rescued your people at all. Now, I know that might seem like he's whinging. This sounds like, Stu, so many Psalms.
Yes, it does.
Right? Yeah. This sounds like so many Psalms that demonstrate what faith is, that grumbling is what you do when you walk away from God. Faith can express itself in this kind of bold, childlike complaint, right? Where does he go? He doesn't go back to Midian.
Yes.
He goes before the Lord, right?
Which requires a set of faith. I mean, to go back and actually complain means you actually believe that God was going to do what he said he was going to do. Otherwise, you wouldn't waste your time.
Exactly. Yeah. So he brings his complaint to God. Yeah. And we're going to see Moses doing this again and again, and God is going to encourage this. Now, remember, we've already seen Abram do this in Genesis 18 when he, that moment of looks like bartering with God, but it's a complaint essentially. Yeah. And God honors that kind of boldness that comes in the boldness of faith. So he does this, and then we have this beautiful moment where he hears from God, right? I mean, chapter 6 is a beautiful chapter. Then the Lord said to Moses, now you will see what I will do to Pharaoh, right? Because you haven't run away. You haven't given up hope, right? Yeah. Yes, you were disappointed with me, but you brought your disappointment to me. Yeah. You didn't grumble and want to go back to Midian. Now, this is important because things are going to get hard in the desert after the Exodus. The people are going to grumble and they're going to want to go back to Egypt. Yes. Right? He doesn't do this. He doesn't grumble and go back to Midian, right? He comes before the Lord. And God is going to honor this mustard seed of faith.
And I believe this is the first time he reveals his name, God does, to Moses. And I'm not sure, he hadn't revealed his name to Abram or Isaac or Jacob. And even when Moses was at the burning bush, he simply said, I am who I am. Yeah. And now he actually reveals his name. Because I think to some degree, Moses was kind of reflecting on the fact that the first question Pharaoh asked is, well, who are you? And
listeners might wonder, what is this stuff about the name? And again, and I would suggest to you that this is a more personal relationship now. I mean, Abram, Isaac, Jacob, all imperfectly. I mean, Abraham is the father of faith, absolutely. But what you see with Moses, I think, is something much more intimate. With Abram, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, you sense God working somewhat in the background. They are trusting in God.
Yes.
But there's not quite the level of constant interaction that we're going to see with Moses. And of course, it makes sense because things are moving forwards here, right? There's greater intimacy here. And so God giving his name to Moses, this is a personal connection, right? Moses is in much more personal, intimate terms. So that's the significance of God giving his name to Moses. When God expresses his intimacy to his people in future, he'll often say things like, I have called you by name. There's a personal, it indicates personal loving relationship. So the fact that God has given his name so that Moses can call him by name shows this new level of intimacy, right? And Moses has just stepped into that because their faith has been tested. He hasn't gone away grumbling. He's come before God with this beautiful, childlike, heartfelt complaint. And God is saying, come on, Moses. All right, now you're going to see what I'm going to do. Yeah. So he sends him back. He says, go back, go again. And he assures him, I will free you from being slaves. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm, with mighty acts of judgment. And then verse 7 of chapter 6, I will take you as my own people and I will be your God. This is the great summary promise, like the great goal, because it's repeated in the book of Revelation.
Yes.
Right, you will be my people and I will be your God. That's the goal of everything, right? So it's beautiful that it's put in here.
And the end of the Old Testament too, right? At the end of the Old Testament.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. And then the other repeated phrase is, and then you will know that I am the Lord your God, right? You are now going to know me in a much more intimate way through what I will do. Because the Lord's name stands for who he is, but also who he will be.
Yeah, right.
That's the I am that I will be what I will be. Yeah. In other words, you're going to get to know me intimately by being involved in my acts. It's beautiful. This is how we know God, right?
But Moses, of course, has doubts. If the Israelites won't listen to me, he kind of goes, because God's telling him to go back and tell them this. If the Israelites won't listen to me, then how on earth will Pharaoh listen to me?
Yeah, he goes back to the Israelites. They don't. They're done with it. They're suffering under this extra burden. They say, "Mate,
just make matters worse.
Go away. Like we're not listening to you." So they're done. Actually, and this is interesting, Stu, because he continues to have faith, but they give up on God. But here's the thing: God doesn't give up on them. God is still going to do this. So then he brings this. He says, "The Israelites won't listen. How am I going to? How's this going to work?"
So then the Lord speaks to Moses and Aaron and gave them commands concerning both the Israelites and Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, to bring the Israelites out of Egypt. And then there's this kind of gap where I think the writer is kind of giving us the genealogy to make sure we understand who Aaron is in the whole picture here, because at the end of that list of genealogy, and you may want to comment on it, it says it was this Aaron and Moses whom the Lord told.
Yeah. So at this point, you might think, why did I put a genealogy here? Why not start it? And we had reference to the 12 tribes, so there was there was certainly connection there. But see, now this is a perfect place for it, because this is where the action really starts. Like, this is where we've had the prologue, and now the Exodus events are really going to start to happen.
Right.
So the question is, okay, so who are these people? Because we haven't really learnt much about Moses or Aaron, right? And to know in the ancient world, to know who someone is to know their genealogy.
Right.
And so that's why you get that there. So it's interesting, actually, that the genealogy is very selective. It's focusing on who they are. So you get the first two, it starts to list the 12 tribes, and you think, are we going to get them all? But you just get the sons of Reuben, and then Simeon, and then Levi, and then it focuses now on the tribe of Levi and the lineage of Moses. So that introduces who they are.
And then we get a little bit of repetition at the beginning, or just at the end of chapter 6, and as we lead into chapter 7, where, again, they reaffirm that the Lord told them to go and see Pharaoh again. But Moses replies again in a way, I'm a poor speaker, I can't do this.
like Moses is going to grow through this, and we're going to see this growth in Moses. But this is still tough, right? He's still doing it tough. I mean, he's holding on.
Yeah, well, the people who thought he was doing it for don't want him to do it.
Yeah.
It's him and God and Aaron at the best, you know, and it feels like everyone's against him.
Yeah,
you know?
But he's just holding on, right?
Yeah.
And then when we get to chapter 7, we have this interesting reply. You know, the Lord said to Moses, "See, I've made you like God to Pharaoh, and your brother Aaron will be your prophet. You are to say everything I command you, and your brother Aaron is to tell Pharaoh to let the Israelites go out of his country." Now, I would say it is a concession. At one level, it's a concession. But in the purpose of God, remember, everything that these people are doing signifies something beyond itself in a way. And so this relationship between Moses and Aaron, and the way that God's going to speak to Moses, and then the way that this is played out, Moses is going to be like God in a sense, and he's going to say something to Aaron. Aaron's going to pass on the message. This becomes the blueprint for biblical prophecy.
Yes.
Right. That's why that's important, because God is drawing a nation out. He wants to speak to this people that he's drawing to himself, and he is going to speak to this people through prophets.
Yes.
And so this is part of setting up that model for how this form of prophecy works, which is different to the gift of prophecy in the related, but slightly different to the gift of prophecy in the New Testament. But we don't need to go into that right now. Now, it's interesting, again, he says, "But I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and though I multiply my signs and wonders in Egypt, he will not listen to you."
It's like, okay, so why are we doing this again?
Exactly, yeah. It's the strange ways of God. But God's got a purpose in this, because something needs to be demonstrated. And what needs to be demonstrated is God is going to bring judgments upon Egypt, and with the express purpose, chapter 7, verse 5, "And the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I stretch out my hand against Egypt and bring the Israelites out of it," right? Yeah. They need to know, among all of the gods that they believe in, he's going to leave them with no doubts about who the true God is.
Which is us answering Pharaoh's question to Moses right at the start. Who is this God you're telling me about? And he's about to show them who he is.
Now, it's interesting, later on, when he introduces the 10th plague, God says to Moses, "I'm not just bringing judgment on Egypt, but he talks about bringing judgment on the gods of Egypt. I mean, that's an interesting statement that he makes later on, because what's going to happen, and the reason there's a multiplicity to this is because, again, this is polytheistic. It's if they had just one God, and the true God Yahweh was going to demonstrate that he is God and that this God of Egypt is just a false God, then one big plague, one big act would be enough.
Yes.
But as the plagues come, it's going to show the Egyptians that they're gods. And as we'll see as we go through these, a lot of these plagues are linked with their deities. And so it's going to show them through the multiplicity of plagues that none of their gods are true gods, but that there is one almighty God. This is all done so that they might know that. Yeah. They might know that.
So each of the plagues was really a direct challenge to a specific Egyptian deity, and we'll talk about those as we get to each of the plagues, and really aimed, as you say, at demonstrating the supremacy of Yahweh over their gods. He was who he said he was.
Yeah, interesting. The first thing that Moses does is that he does this sign with the staff, throwing the staff down. This is not one of the plagues as such. This is an initial sign where he throws down the staff, it becomes a serpent, and then he picks it up again. So he does this. I think this is interesting for two possible reasons, Stu. One is the significance of the serpent so far in the story. There's something about the work of the serpent. This is a theme right through the Bible, the sort of presence of the serpent. So Moses, in a sense, he has the power that Adam and Eve relinquished to Satan.
Right.
There's a sense in which Moses has this in his staff is the staff of his authority, right? It's your staff is like your passport in the ancient world, right?
Yes.
So it's who you are. And so there's a sense in which God's call has reconsecrated Moses, repositioned Moses with this authority. And this is represented, I think, by the staff. And so I find it very interesting that, that this initial sign is this kind of control over the power of the serpent, in a sense.
Yes.
I think there's something there.
Totally. Well, particularly
we don't want to make too much of it, but I think there's something there.
Well, particularly given Pharaoh then summons his magicians and they throw their staffs and they also turn into serpents. But then, of course, the staffs of Moses, the serpents of Moses and Aaron eat.
Yeah, that's right. Because remember,
swallow all the serpents of.
Yeah, and they are utilizing the powers of the evil one in a sense, you know. But yeah, the fact that Moses' staff consumes theirs, again, very important sign.
Well, actually, Aaron's staff.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm not sure how important that is, but the scripture kind of says here it was Aaron's staff. So, and of course, Pharaoh, having seen that, still doesn't listen, and his heart hardens, and he did not listen to them as the Lord had said. So now we sort of move into this situation where God's...
Moses and Aaron are functioning really as one here, because remember, they are demonstrating the relationship between the prophet and God. So what one does represents what the other does. So, you know, Moses, Aaron, it's
interchangeable to some degree. Yeah.
To some degree interchangeable here. So now we come to the plagues. By the way, it's also interesting that the pharaohs on their headdress, if you look at a picture of a pharaoh, they had a snake, you know, up on their forehead, which was a sign, you know, symbol of Egypt as well. So anyway, that's just an interesting one. So Pharaoh hardens his heart, and, you know, God sees this. Pharaoh's heart is unyielding. Right. Moses, through Aaron, goes, let my people go, brings this imperative to Pharaoh. And he refuses, so he strikes the waters of the Nile, and the waters turn to blood. This is the lifeblood of Egypt.
Yeah.
And so this is catastrophic, initially catastrophic. But if you take the pantheistic element, you know, this is the Nile as the source of their life deified. This is Egypt bleeding.
So the god that was challenged here was a god Hapi, however you say that, or Hapi, god of the Nile, and also Osiris, whose bloodstream was mythologically linked to the river as well. So those are the two Egyptian gods that through this plague are being challenged here to say that God, Yahweh, is greater.
Yeah, that's right. Interesting that it says the Egyptian magicians did the same things by their secret arts. What they actually did is hard to say because all the water was already turned to blood.
Yeah.
So it's difficult to say what tricks they're pulling off here. I think, Stu, I do think this shows that there's some, I would suggest, we don't need to just think that these were just tricks.
No.
I think there's probably some real demonic stuff going on behind this.
Oh, yeah.
Certainly. Think that's possible. And I think this is, I think this was what leads, because, I mean, when God's going to warn them about the inhabitants of the land and the witchcraft and the occult, and, I think we need to take that stuff seriously for the danger that it was. Anyway, so Pharaoh...
Because his magicians were able to do the same thing, decided, he hardened his heart even further.
Then there's the next plague. Now, one of the things that I'll say in general about these plagues, Stu, is that there's a sense of uncreation here in these plagues. Like this is reversing essentially everything that we've seen in Genesis chapter 1, because everything's crossing boundaries here. Like first of all, the plagues affect the water, the sky, and the ground.
Yes.
So we've had a curse on the water. Now a plague is going to come up from the water. And there's a sense in which the next plague, which is the plague of frogs, this is frogs invading the homes. This is things crossing their boundaries, right? Everything's crossing their boundaries here. And I think this is important because essentially what's happening here is that the forces of chaos, big theme, important notion in the ancient world, the Egyptians and other ancient Near Eastern peoples saw their pockets of civilization, in a sense, as staving off the forces of chaos. That was the most feared thing, really. We take the orderliness of our society for granted, right? Because we have something like a world order. I mean, it keeps getting shaken just to remind us that it's not as stable as we think. But in the ancient world, the world is a chaotic place, and civilizations were pockets of order in the midst of that. Man-made order, right? Man-made order. Not God. God's order was given in Genesis chapter 3. Human beings rejected that, and they create these pockets of civilization. And this is why kings in the ancient world were demigods, in a sense, because they were the ones, they were the makers of this order, right? Just that they were trying to be like God.
Yes.
by creating their little Edens, right? And if you think of Egypt as being like a little man-made Eden, like, and Pharaoh is the demigod who holds off the chaos. And chaos was always symbolized by the waters in the ocean and the heaving ocean. So we're holding back the waters of chaos, right? Psalm 93, the seas have lifted up, the seas have lifted up their voice. The seas have lifted up their pounding waves, right? It's the forces of chaos, right, wanting to close in over us. Now, essentially what happens in these plagues is the forces of chaos, because they believe that the gods were instrumental at holding back the chaos. But right now, the gods become the chaos. They are the chaos, right? And so you've got frogs coming out of the rivers and invading the homes. Everything's crossing boundaries here.
Yeah. So the frogs were challenged the god Hecate, the Egyptian god Hecate, who was the goddess of fertility, often depicted as a frog in ancient Egypt. So again, God dealing with each of their gods, their deities, as you say, that they thought were holding back chaos and creating order.
Yep, that's right. Still up to this point, the magicians are still
matching.
I'm not sure if matching, but kind of somewhat mirroring or copying what Moses is doing.
Yeah.
It's the next, they're going to come to the end of themselves with the next one. So we've had a plague from the waters, because the frogs come up out of the waters, curse on the waters with the Nile. Now we're going to see a plague from the ground, right? And God commands Aaron to strike. What he says to Moses, who says to Aaron. We'll shorthand this, Stu. Because it's Moses is the one that's instrumental in this. Aaron is the vessel for this. I think that's an accurate way to talk about this, because ultimately this is God doing this as well. But they are kind of signifying how all this works. Anyway, point is, strikes the ground, and when they do this, all these, what are they? They're gnats. Are they mosquitoes? Are they some kind of lice, perhaps? A plague of lice.
Basically, the dust turns into
people
lice.
And animals.
Yeah.
I mean, it is frightening. I know we think, big creatures are frightening, but actually, I think some of the more frightening things are the little swarming creatures. Imagine swarming lice in like the dust of the ground, swarming over everything and everyone.
And again,
Terrifying.
This challenges another Egyptian god, Geb, who was the god of the earth. As we've heard, the dust of Egypt was turned into lice or gnats, or whatever that might have been. Yeah. But still, Pharaoh wasn't going to listen.
Yeah, and also the magicians can't. They've come to the end of themselves now, and they're not going to be able to do anything.
Well, they actually say to Pharaoh, "This is the finger of God."
Yeah, that's right. They acknowledge
beyond
it.
Us.
So they acknowledge it before Pharaoh's willing to. So the next plague that comes on Egypt is the plague of the flies. So this is a curse from the air now, right? We've had the curse from the waters, the curse from the ground, and now a curse from the air. And in this instance, I mean, flies, again, what are they? We don't know exactly. Some kind of swarming insects over everything. And this time there's something else. It's interesting that in each case, because remember, this is always symbolizing something. And in this case, it says on that day, God says, I will deal differently with the land of Goshen. This is where the Israelites live. That's
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where my people live. No swarms of flies will be there, so that you will know that I, the Lord, am in this land. I will make a distinction. Distinction is very important because they're set apart, okay? I will make a distinction between my people and your people. This sign will occur tomorrow, right? Notice he calls it a sign, right? God is saying things by what he's doing.
I think he's also he's trying to say, well, you could just assume these are just plagues that are affecting everybody and it's not really God, but I'm actually going to show you.
Yeah.
It's only going to affect you guys and not these guys.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So this is the inspiration behind Psalm 91. It talks about the plague that destroys at midday and you will not fear the pestilence that stalks in the darkness or the plague that comes by night.
Yeah.
You will only see with your eyes, but it will not come near you. That's Psalm 91. Because you dwell, as the psalm says, under the shelter of the Most High. And this is signifying that. So flies, Stu.
So again,
Tell us about flies.
Yeah, the Egyptian god Khepri, who was the god of creation, often represented in ancient Egypt, as a scarab beetle.
Yeah, that's right. We could have many different, whatever insects, they are, many different insects swarming throughout Egypt here.
Now, something happens at the end of that one, though. So the flies come, and Pharaoh starts to his magicians have run out of capacity, shall we say.
Yeah.
And Pharaoh summons Moses and Aaron, and he says, go sacrifice to your God within the country, basically.
Yeah.
In other words, not out in the desert, which is what Moses had asked. But Moses said it would be not right to do that, because what we will sacrifice to the Lord our God is detestable to the Egyptians. If we sacrifice what the Egyptians detest in front of them, won't they stone us? We must go a distance of 3 days into the wilderness and sacrifice to the Lord our God as he instructs us.
Yeah.
And Pharaoh responded, I will let you go and sacrifice to the Lord your God in the wilderness, but don't go very far. Make an appeal for me.
Yeah, or pray for me, says now pray for me in the NIV.
Yeah.
So Moses, he does this, but then Pharaoh, what does he do? He goes back. He goes back in his word. And so
hardens his heart further.
He hardens his heart, right? And so then we have the next plague, which is actually now on the livestock of Egypt. So this is the beginning of death coming on Egypt now. He does this on the livestock of the Egyptians. Yet again, it says, verse 4, but the Lord will make a distinction between the livestock of Israel and that of Egypt, so that no animal belonging to the Israelites will die. So this is plague on the livestock.
Yeah. So the Egyptian god there, Hathor, which was the goddess of love and protection, often depicted as a cow, and Apis, who was a sacred bull deity in Egypt at the time.
Yeah. Still, Pharaoh hardens his heart. He's not going to let the people go. And then we have the next plague, which is the plague of boils. So this is the first plague on the people themselves. It's touching them. I mean, this is just horrible, festering boils breaking out on the people and the animals throughout the land.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting that it's the people and their animals, because in the order of God, what we do has implication for all creatures. I think this is an important statement of that.
For creation.
Yeah, because we are the rulers of creation. So if we come out from under the shelter of the Most High, we bring chaos. Our rule brings a curse on everything. So this, you see this happening here, that death comes upon the livestock, and then the boils come on people and the livestock still.
And the magicians in this case.
And the magicians as well.
Yeah, so they couldn't even come to Pharaoh to try to deal with it. The boils challenged the Egyptian god Sekhmet, who was the goddess of healing and disease, and Imhotep, who was the god of medicine.
Yeah.
There we go.
Still, Pharaoh hardens his heart.
Yeah. So we're working our way systematically through the Egyptian gods.
Yeah.
And God is saying, you're asking me who I am? Let me show you who I am.
Yeah, that's right. And again, there's the repeated phrase, his heart was unyet all, but the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart. That's repeated throughout this.
Many
the Lord
times.
hardened Pharaoh's heart, right? Because he's going to go through and there are going to be 10 plagues. I mean, the number 10, Stu, is important because this is uncreation happening here, right? This is unleashing the forces of chaos on Egypt, which is an act of uncreation.
Yes.
Now, creation was established with 10 divine commands, right? 10 commands, and the Lord said in Genesis chapter 1. And now we have 10 plagues that undo creation, as it were, and unleash chaos on Egypt. So that's important, the number of plagues.
So the 7th plague is hail, massive storms. Again, Moses and Aaron go to say, you haven't let the people go. This is what's going to happen as a result of that.
And then there's a statement here, Stu, in verse 16, where God says to Pharaoh, but I have raised you up for this very purpose,
to show
that I might show you my power and that my name might be proclaimed in all the earth, right? So this is not out of God's control. God's not getting frustrated here and, he's not listening. Why does it? No. God is sovereign over all of this in a really paradoxical way, Stu, because Pharaoh is responding to God and held accountable for this. So notice that. It's not, yes, God is hardening his heart, but he is still culpable. It's because God is compounding what's already there.
Yeah.
And there is a mysterious, unfathomable sovereignty here in the fact that all along, Pharaoh was always raised up for this purpose, that the power of God might be demonstrated in this way. Now, work that out. You're not going to be able to understand that through our limited logical perspective, but that's the sovereignty of God, isn't it?
But God then he gives him a bit of a heads up. There's going to be how get your livestock and people under shelter.
Yeah.
This is what's going to happen. And but it seems that it was only the ones who feared the word of the Lord, the Pharaoh's officials, who made their servants and livestock flee to shelters. But those who didn't take the Lord's word seriously left their servants and livestock out in the field.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is, that the sky is closing in on them. Again, as an act of uncreation, the idea, the creation of the firmament, this is essentially closing in on them. So this is part of this act of uncreation where these massive hailstones rain down. We are, by the way, you get a repeat of a lot of this sort of thing in the book of Revelation when it describes the ultimate acts of judgment on the earth. All of this sort of imagery is kind of reused in the book of Revelation as well.
So the hailstorm was a challenge to the Egyptian god Nut, who was the goddess of the sky, and Seth, who was the god of storms and chaos. And then we move on to the 8th plague.
Okay, so the hail doesn't come on the land of the Israelites.
No, that's right, it doesn't. Correct.
And
again.
Pharaoh says to Moses and Aaron, and this is in chapter 9, verse 27, this time I have sinned, he said to them. The Lord is right, and I and my people are wrong. Pray to the Lord, for we have had enough thunder and hail. I will let you go. You don't have to stay any longer. Now, God knows very well that he's going to relent on this, but he's going to do this because Moses says, when I've gone out of the city, I'll spread out my hands in prayer to the Lord, and the thunder will stop, and there'll be no more hail, so that you may know that the earth is the Lord's, right? So that you may know this. And he does this, but of course.
But Moses actually goes on to say, but as for you and your officials, I know that you still do not fear the Lord God.
Yeah, that's right. So it's interesting that this time when it talks about the hardening of Pharaoh's heart, it doesn't just say that Pharaoh hardens his heart. It says he and his officials harden their heart.
Yeah.
So everyone does this time. The next plague is the plague of locusts. And, again, God says, go to Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the hearts of his officials, so that I may perform these signs of mine among them, that you may tell your children and grandchildren how I dealt harshly with the Egyptians and how I perform my signs among them, and that you may know that I am the Lord. Right? This is why I'm doing this. This is about you knowing who I am. So they go, let my people go that they may worship me. It's interesting that that's the command too, Stu.
Yes, it is.
It's not just let my people go so they can be free from slavery. No, let my people go so that they can worship me. That's the goal of our liberation. So Pharaoh's officials say, how long will this man be a snare to us? Let these people go. Mate.
That's right.
So they were brought to Pharaoh. He says, go, but he's going to go back on this. I mean,
yes, he does.
He's just not going. This is not going to go anywhere good right now for Pharaoh. And so this plague of locusts come upon the land, and they're going to strip. Locusts came in dense clouds, and it was one of the most feared things in the ancient world. I mean, plagues of locusts were already bad. This one will have been particularly bad. Yeah. And they are going to strip the land bare
of whatever's left
food.
By now. Yeah.
There's going to be nothing for anyone here. Yeah. So this is, a plague of locusts. This is the theme of the prophecy of Joel. It's a very common theme of judgment. These locusts coming, just ravaging the land, taking away the fruitfulness of the land. So shocking.
And again, this is challenging the Egyptian god Nepa, who was the god of grain, and again, Osiris, who was associated with agriculture.
Yeah. Yep. But again, the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart so that he would not let the Israelites go. And so this time, now remember I talked about uncreation on the first, what's the first act of creation? And God said, let there be light.
Yes.
Okay. So now the ultimate act of uncreation before the final plague is the bringing of darkness upon the land. And so Moses stretched out his hand toward the sky, and total darkness covered all Egypt for 3 days. No one could see anyone else or move about for 3 days. Yet all the Israelites had light in the places where they live. That becomes a symbol. Your word is a light to my path, and walking in the light. God has raised me up that I may walk in the light of life. All of this imagery is going to become very important.
Interesting that it says in my translation, I'm not sure if it says it in yours, a darkness that can be felt.
Yeah.
Like a spiritual darkness as well as just a physical darkness.
Yeah, that's right.
Suspect.
Yeah. That's right. And darkness, of course, has this multi-dimensional kind of meaning to it. Yes. I mean, it was literal darkness.
Yes.
But there is a there is this spiritual darkness over Egypt, and God is causing this to close in upon them.
And of course, the Egyptian god, as most of us would know, was Ra, the sun god.
Yeah.
Was one of the Egyptian gods, and also Horus, the god of the sky. So God again's challenging these deities that they had, answering Pharaoh's question right at the start. So who is this God?
Yeah.
It's like, why should I listen to him?
Yeah.
Well, we've given you a few good reasons now.
Yeah, that's
listen
right.
To him.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. So Pharaoh says, go, okay, go, just go. Moses says, yeah, okay, but we're going to take all of our herds and flocks with us, so all of our possessions, pretty much. Pharaoh just loses it. It says here, again, the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he says, get out of my, he wants nothing. The guy's it's just madness at this point. And so Moses says, all right, just as you say, Moses replied, I will never appear before you again. You've just had your last
warning.
You've had your last warning. Fine. If you're not going to listen, I'll stop speaking. It's the ultimate act of God's judgment. If you stop listening, God will stop speaking.
Yeah.
And this is where we come to the 10th plague, Stu, and it's very significant. We're going to talk about this in the next episode.
Yeah.
The 10th plague that comes with the institution of the Passover.
Yeah.
And this is going to lead to the exodus from Egypt. So a bit of a cliffhanger, Stu.
Yes.
I think a lot of people who are listening know where this story goes, but there's a lot of significance to what happens here on.
Yeah.
It's more than just a story. Every element of this is a sign. God is always saying something through what he's doing.
And it points forward right the way forward. So exciting.
That's right. Now, again, Stu, I think to close, let's be reminded that this is not just what God did. In a sense, this is what God does. He wants to defeat the things that bind us, that keep us in darkness. He wants to deliver us. The question is, will we trust him? Will we be delivered? Will we listen to the voice of God? Because God is ever the deliverer. Even with Pharaoh here. Pharaoh is, in a very real sense, being given a chance here. He has a choice to make. But God continues to speak and continues to speak as he does to us. The fact is, as long as we live in this day of redemption, as long as we live, God will speak to us and speak to us and speak to us to call us out of captivity to sin and guilt, which is made possible through Jesus Christ, the blood of the real Passover lamb that we're going to hear about in the next episode, and to lead us to true freedom.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Thrive Deeper. Our home on the internet is thrivetoday.tv. You can contact us, ask questions, see all our resources and much more at our website thrivetoday.tv. We really appreciate the questions and thoughts about what you're reading as we go through the Bible with Thrive. Until next time, our prayer is that these shows will inspire you to go deeper and thrive.